In this video we'll be looking at the Far South Network's Com.X1 PBX VoIP gateway and accessing this unit, installing it, wiring it, and accessing the GUI. So here is the Com.X1 boxed up, arrives at your doorstep, beautifully packaged, and when you open the box, inside is the unit itself, packaged for a bumpy ride, as well as basic instructions for getting started. There are some cables, power cables, as well as rack mounting kit in case you want to mount it in a rack, or you can use some feet to mount it on a desk. Looking at this diagram, this is an earthing diagram for the Com.X. As you can see, it should be earthed to a proper building earth, or a power company provider earth, or a telco earth, using an earthing strap. But notice that the power supply for the Com.X1 units already has earthing included, so be careful of creating earth loops by wiring both to a cabinet and a low resistance path through the normal power brick. Here's a multimeter that you can use to test the resistance in the wires. 0.2, 0.3 ohms are acceptable. Connecting the unit up, use a serial cable with pins 2 and 3 swapped around and pin 5 ground pin straight through. 12 volt DC power supply, and as you can see here, Ethernet cable connected to LAN 3. So if you're connecting to a statically configured port such as LAN 2 or LAN 3, use a crossover pinout detailed in this diagram. You can see some of the pins here are swapped around, or you can use DHCP by default on LAN 1. Connecting using serial, you can see the settings here. I've loaded PuTTY here with 115.200, 891, and connecting to the serial port, turning on the unit, you should see the unit going through its boot process. Let's have a look at that. Variety of services would load during the boot process, and during boot, if you've plugged in on LAN 1, you should see the DHCP IP being assigned to the Ethernet port by your DHCP server. There we go, trying to boot off the network, failing to do so, but it does receive an IP from the DHCP server, in this case 192.168.0.88. There we go, that's web server loading. And at this point you should be able to access the unit using SSH or from the web browser. Once the boot process has completed, you get a serial login prompt, default username, comma, default password, far south, one word, all lower caps. You'd use the same access credentials accessing it from the SSH console, and PuTTY has an SSH feature. If you can ping the unit, you can probably log on to it, so let's give that a bash. From the web browser, simply hitting the IP of the box gives you the web front end. Logging it as administrator with default username admin, password admin also allows you a graphical view of configuring the system and its Ethernet interfaces. Looking at the Ethernet interfaces, and first the hardware. The unit ships from the factory with the hardware device already enabled, all the ports available. You can change your host name, domain, primary DNS server, secondary DNS server, gateways, and there we've got the Ethernet interfaces. Static configurations, dynamic DHCP configurations, and let's add a DHCP server for LAN 3. So we can serve IPs to our phones as they come online. we're good to go. All that remains now is to apply, and all these changes should take effect. Note that when you've made network changes, we recommend that you restart the device. In the case that you've lost the IP address to your unit, or someone else configured it, you can use the Nmap tool as shown here. Far South Networks, changing the telephony landscape for good. Visit us on the web at farsouthnet.com. If you have a query or support question, please contact your local distributor or send us an email at support@farsouthnet.com.